Where is she? Hi, Kira. Hi, Judy. Hi, Iris. Welcome. We are now also being live streamed. Okay. I saw Ariel come in. Then what happened?
I saw her. She's there.
There she is. Yay! We're so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know that more people are going to be coming in. We're also live streaming on YouTube. So welcome to the people who have joined us there as well. I'm Esther, founder and CEO of Mind Myself, and we are starting What the Hormone is Happening to Me, Part 2, Redefining Menopause, Sex, and Body Image in Midlife. We're so glad you're here joining us. And I have a few things to do in housekeeping up front. And one is relax, enjoy yourself, ask your questions in the chat. I know Wendy's going to be engaged in monitoring that for us, and both in Zoom and live on YouTube. There is a chat there. We can't interact, but we would welcome your comments because we will read them all later. Mind Myself vision. Cultivating unity in this time that we've had of divisiveness, and to help you feel seen and heard and supported in your health journey as you become your own best health advocate. And I want to thank the team. I could not do this by myself. It is so important to have a team around us as women to make sure that we are supported and that we have people to talk with. And a brief land acknowledgement. I know that I feel so privileged and blessed to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kaikait, and Tsawwassen First Nations, also known as Surrey, BC. And no event like this can take place without a disclaimer, so I'm just going to read that for you here. All the information and advice from Mind Myself and the practitioners is for general education purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information here and on the Mind Myself website should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat medical conditions. We always recommend that you consult with a doctor or other qualified healthcare practitioner for individualized medical advice on specific medical issues. So there you go. You've been asked, you've been told, and there you go. Aging is not a disease. It's a gift. It's a privilege to grow old and to have lived a long life. We are here at various different stages, and I am thrilled to be welcoming our three amazing practitioners to this event today. Those of you who are here with us on part 1 of What the Hormone, you've met them and you know how awesome they are. For those of you joining us for the first time, we have Dr. Neelima Deshpande, Dr. Jetta Boughton, and Ariel Richards, and they are now going to take a moment to introduce themselves. So let's start with Ariel.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see you today. So my specialty is helping people, in particular women, to overcome emotional eating and sugar addiction. And I do that through nutrition, particularly holistic nutrition, so looking at the root cause of all of our illnesses, as well as different energetic practices, Reiki, the emotional freedom technique, and certain aspects of transformational coaching. And so I'm very happy to be here with you today, speaking specifically on this topic, which is near and dear to my heart. Several years ago, I went through a very traumatic birth, and I lost the functioning of my pituitary gland, which basically shut down my glandular system in a day. So since then, I've been working to regain my personal health and my glandular health back, and I've learned so much, and I'm very excited to share some of that information with you today.
Fantastic, and this is how we applaud here. This is how deaf people do applause, so we'll do that here too. Dr. Neelima.
Hello, hi everyone.
And thank you so much for having me back again. My specialty is menopause and sexual health and urinary incontinence. And I've worked in the UK, in India, and Bhutan. And I realized in a very painful way, how menopause can be so challenging and can cause so many ups and downs in our lives. And if you don't have the right person to ask questions and get answers from, it makes the journey really difficult. So I wanted to be the person I could have gone to when I went through all my difficulties. So that's what I trained myself to be.
We're so grateful for that, for all your
Thank you.
stories and journeys too. That's amazing. Thank you. Jetta.
I'm Dr. Jetta Boughton, and I work in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I have a focus on women's health, hormones, fertility, a lot of menopause, and any stage of hormone health, really. I utilize my training is in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So I'm utilizing my training using herbs, acupuncture, and then dietary supplements, things like that. And over the years, I've been practicing since 2003. And over the years, I've seen a lot of women that need help with hormone transition. And it's been really great being able to offer something that is not mainstream. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And so before we just get into our questions, because we're going to dive right in, another quote. As I get older, I realize that what I want most of all is to be comfortable in my own skin and to find a balance between acceptance and growth. I think that's a fabulous way to kick off our questions. And the first one that we're going to dive into is, what are some social stigmas and myths surrounding menopause and aging? And let's start with Neelima.
I come from a country where, aging is celebrated in women, in gods and goddesses, but they're always depicted as being really young. So, we have this tradition where so-and-so goddess is like so many hundreds and millions of years old, but she's always like this sexy woman with great boobs and narrow waist and amazing hips. And unfortunately, as we go through menopause, most women are like that. They kind of lose the curves in between. So when media starts to depict women, they kind of exclude the top. So once you cross 50, you don't become a part of media. Very few women actually get to star on the covers of magazines or get to start talking about their challenges and how they've conquered the world. And a lot of them who do get to get the stage, they're usually leaders or they're CEOs of companies, and they have their rightful place in media. But average women like you and me often get ignored.
That's so true. Anything to add, Jetta or Ariel? Jetta?
I think women get depicted as being irritable and kind of bitchy. And I always think, well, we're taught not to be direct, and then we hit this age where we start becoming direct and honest, and then it turns into this negative stigma. And I think sometimes that is the way we should have always been. So that's one that I notice.
Thank you. Ariel?
I would say specifically when clients are coming to me, it's because they've gone and Googled menopause or perimenopause or this period of their life, and they are traumatized and just terrified that these things are going to happen to them because, of course, Dr. Google depicts the worst case scenario. And so they think that I'm going to absolutely lose my mind, or I'm going to end up debilitated in bed, depressed, I'm going to gain 50 pounds. We tend to fear the worst, right? So this is what women are expecting when it comes to menopause in this time of life. And then, of course, there's the fear of becoming obsolete as we get older. And so, as Dr. Nalima was saying, it's so important that we're having these conversations so that we can actually talk about what's going on behind the scenes. How are we really feeling? What's the reality? Does it have to be that way? Or if you're working with practitioners who can support you, maybe there are ways to mitigate some of those symptoms and actually make it a lot more smooth and gentle and maybe not enjoyable, but definitely an experience that we grow from.
Well, here's to finding ways to maybe make some parts of it enjoyable and learning from it. But we'll dive into some more of that a little bit later. Let's talk about what is perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. I know that I've heard from a number of people on both ends of the spectrum, oh, I'm not there yet, I don't need to see this or hear this because I'm not there. And then other people saying, oh, I'm so past menopause, it doesn't relate to me anymore. And my understanding from talking to you three amazing women is that each of those phases have their own journey and their own particularities involved. So let's talk a little bit about that. Ariel, do you want to jump in first and just what's your definition for those three states?
Well, maybe we could all do perimenopause and then we'll
Sure.
kind of move along.
Sure.
But essentially, many women tend to think that it's almost like a light switch and it's like, oh, I'm premenopausal and then now I'm menopausal. And in reality, it's very natural and normal for the ovaries to gradually stop working over time. And this can take a decade or so, depending on our state of health and our stress and many other factors. And what we're actually seeing more and more these days is because people are very busy, they carry more stress just generally on the day-to-day. Maybe they're not as well nourished, maybe they're not as well rested. But it does seem that things are going along as normal, and then there tends to be some hair loss or a drastic change in mood or some severe weight gain or something like that tends to happen. And they think, oh, well, this is the brunt of it. This is menopause hitting me. When in reality, it usually lengthens out to maybe a year or more where the ovulation is becoming a little more erratic and the periods are becoming a little less regular and the flow tends to change length. So we have this grace period where things just gradually transition. And if we take the time to tune into our body and notice our body, we can make sure that we're doing our best to be rested, hydrated, nourished, and making that transition as easy as possible. And as I said before, to mitigate some of those symptoms.
Fantastic. Jetta, do you have any comments on perimenopause and what it is?
I can ditto Ariel's words. And one of the interesting things that that happens is because our ovaries are starting to do less work and not produce the way that they did previously when we were in our fertile years, our adrenals are asked to be doing more work. So that puts a lot more stress on the adrenal system when there's, oftentimes we are blaming stress for some of our issues, but realistically, there's a lot more stress on the adrenals from an endocrine point of view or a hormone point of view. And then when we're not looking after ourselves, doing some of the things that Ariel mentioned, like getting enough sleep and water, hydration, and nutrition, that puts a more physiological stress on the endocrine system. And so in perimenopause, when our cycles are starting to change, our hormone levels are starting to change because our ovaries aren't working the way they did, then that's when we actually need to start really looking after our adrenals so they can pick up the slack for what the ovaries are going to eventually stop doing.
Wow. And Nilima, if you could comment also on what's the average age range of perimenopause as well in your answer.
Yeah, internationally, the average age for menopause is 52. And plus, it ranges anywhere from the age of 46 to the age of 54. In Asian countries, the age is a little bit lower. So it's like in countries like India, China, Southeast Asia, it's between the ages of 46 and 48. I have patients who have had periods even until the age of 54 and 55. And maybe later on, we'll talk about the risks of continuing to bleed, into your mid and late 50s. By definition, menopause is when you've not had a period for 12 consecutive months. So really, the diagnosis of menopause is a retrospective one. You don't know until you've gone without a period for 12 months before you can start calling yourself menopausal. One of the things that happens is because perimenopause is, between 5 to 7 years before and after your last period, you actually don't know when it starts to happen for you. And you can, for many women, we know that it can begin even in their late 30s. And women who stop having periods before the age of 40, they're called early menopauses, premature menopauses, or premature ovarian failures. And women who have menopause before the age of 45, but after the age of 40 are called women who have early menopause. And each of those people have their own unique challenges because of all the physiological changes that are happening in the body because of decreasing estrogen levels. In my experience, what I found is that because this duration is so long, 10 or 15 years of dealing with these symptoms, we tend to get into certain habits. And this is more to do with the psychological aspects of menopause, the typical grumpy old woman, the woman who's irritable and, can't stand things or doesn't take nonsense. Or like my dad used to say, you don't tolerate stupidity very well. I was like, oh, stop saying that. So but the thing is, we develop certain coping styles with these behaviors, and they become our habits. And if we don't have the awareness and the alertness to catch ourselves, then we can end up becoming these grumpy old women for the rest of our lives. And we don't want to be that.
No, we absolutely don't. So that's led us nicely into menopause. Let's maybe talk about menopause and post-menopause. And so I know that the technical definition of post-menopause is when you've stopped having a period after about a year. But what are the differences in our hormonal structures? Maybe, Neelima, you could just keep going on in that conversation just for a moment.
So what's happening as you're leading towards menopause? Say from your 40s is your estrogen, your ovaries are producing fewer and fewer eggs. So your estrogen levels are going up and down. So nothing crashes unless you have a surgical menopause. So unless you have your ovaries removed surgically, then your estrogen level just goes zoom. Well, most of the time they're just going down and up and down, and they're kind of modulating their ways down. And what happens in post-menopause is, for the initial couple of years, maybe after your last period, your hormone levels are still going like a waveform. But about 3 to 4 years down the line, they reach a much more steady state. They're still low, but they reach a steadier state. And for many women, around 4, 5, 6 years post-menopause is when they start to observe this slight clarity in their thinking. The brain fog kind of becomes a little bit better. Their mood swings tend to become a little bit better. Women who've had very severe hot flushes throughout their late 40s, 50s might find that the hot flushes, though their severity starts to kind of flatten out a bit, and they become a lot more predictable because the hormone swings are not as severe. Some women will continue to have hot flushes well into their 70s and 80s. It's a small percentage, only about 5%. But some changes like dementia, the bladder changes, osteoporosis are commoner as we go into the post-menopause. And that's usually not something that women want to think about when they're in the pre-menopause, perimenopause stage. They look at it as happening to somebody else. But the truth is, the seeds for all of those problems are being sown in the 20 or 30 years before menopause happens.
Right. And we're going to get to some tips and solutions for that a little bit later in the conversation. Jetta, do you have anything to add about that? Menopause, post-menopause, in your experience?
Yeah,
Women?
I think she pretty well covered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ariel?
I would just add that a lot of what Dr. Neelima was describing in post-menopause has happened because the body is now sustaining that lower level of estrogen predominantly. There's a lot of other hormones involved, but that's why we see those symptoms being long lasting, and we see the increased risk of things like heart disease and osteoporosis. Many people associate estrogen with just being about making babies and the ovaries, and in reality, it has so much more to do with our overall health. And that's why if there are people listening who are postmenopausal, it's not like, oh, phew, I've kind of gone through the difficult part. It's like, well, now I need to take extra special care of my body to make sure that I'm taking care of my glandular system and regulating, so that those risk factors are not as big in my life personally.
Yes, great. Go ahead, Neelima.
Because I talk to so many of my family members who are menopausal, postmenopausal. They're in their late 50s, early 60s, and they don't want to hear about menopause. They don't want to know, well, we've already stopped having periods. We don't have a problem. We don't have a problem. But it's one of them has had a stroke. A friend of ours died yesterday. She was 65. Another colleague died on Monday, again, heart disease. So the numbers, the statistics are alarming. Nobody talks about the numbers. Okay, 1 billion women going through menopause. 30%, 40% of them are going to get heart disease. Of them, 10% are going to die of a heart attack that wasn't diagnosed on time because they never got to a doctor. Somebody didn't take them seriously.
Wow. So this conversation we're having today is so important. It's not something you can just stop. Okay, I don't have my period anymore. Let's keep the conversation going. And the next question has to do with sexual health. I know that in our 20s and 30s, and women reach their peak around their 32, and then they're maybe a decade and a half from perimenopause, maybe not even. How does this hormone change affect our sexual behavior, our sexual desires, our ability to have sex, our enjoyment of sex? Jetta, why don't you start us off?
In Chinese medicine, there's cycles in terms of women and men, and they're a little different. In women, we say 49 is the mean age of going through menopause. Of course, there's a lot of outliers to that. But in terms of how our bodies start to change sexually, is our libidos start to wax and wane. Some women will their libido will start to increase. Some women, their libido goes down. Their energy can start to change. Like I was saying with the adrenals, the body has to now rely a little bit more on the adrenal health and other parts of the endocrine system. So there's a shift in how our body accesses energy and different types of energies. How our body is thermoregulating starts to change. Sometimes it's difficult to maintain body temperature day or night. A lot of those concepts are really important in Chinese medicine. We're looking at energies, whether opposite energies like hot and cold and dampness and dryness and stagnation and circulation, and those types of things are going to start to take a little bit more pressure or stress on the body to maintain those balances in those different energetic. And then we call them energetic, and sometimes that sounds kind of woo-woo, but really hot and cold are just opposite energies. And you get, some women will have night sweats or hot flashes or day dysregulations. They can even have a hot body and cold hands and feet, or develop things like Raynaud's, where they are not getting the blood flow to their fingers or toes. And those are all, in Chinese medicine, those are really important concepts when it comes to treating the body and helping the body maintain its own balance. Mm-hmm. So it affects how our body accesses energy and how our body sleeps and how our moods are. And ultimately it affects our desire for sex, and even the lubrication and body fluids and those types of things.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ariel, can you jump in on this one, please?
I'll comment on the behavioral aspect, building on what Dr. Jetta was saying, because when I'm talking to my clients about this, they're experiencing this natural physiological decline. So their desire is lower. It's harder for them to become aroused because of the added stress and the stress on the adrenals. They're potentially more irritable and not as interested in their particular partner. And then there's also the fact that they're being told, well, now you're not as sexy because you're getting older. And it's almost like this is proof, because it's like, oh, see, my body is now betraying me. And then because they're more irritable, they're not as connected with their partner or partners. And so it really all builds, and then it affects the mental and emotional health, because we end up questioning ourselves, and it affects our self-esteem and everything else. And so it affects sex and our sex lives on so many different levels. And then, of course, when it comes to my clients, it usually ends up in consolation and coping strategies, maybe using food or leaning into alcohol or some other kind of escapism just to avoid the problem completely. And then, of course, that further, it just makes the issue bigger. And so I'm so glad we're having this conversation, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about helping the body through that. And I know we're going to get into conversations about communication. So I'll leave it there for now.
For sure. Neelima, anything to add to that before we get into some strategies of managing some of this?
I just wanted to illustrate this with 3 case studies, quickly, very briefly. So one was a couple where the husband brought the wife to me and said, "Ma'am, can you do something about her? She doesn't want to have sex. She thinks it's only because I'm a man I want to have sex, and she couldn't care less. And she's kind of given up the idea because we had kids 20 years ago. Can you convince her otherwise?" That was one case. And the other case is a dear friend of mine who's entered her mid-40s, been divorced for 10 years, been really looking for love, but not expecting to find it because she put on weight and she got thyroid issues and she was having heavy periods. She went on WildFit, sorted everything out, became nice and slim and amazing. She's found a new love and she's raring to go. She's got orgasms sorted out. She's got vagina sorted out. She's got her sex toys. She's got a partner. Yeah. And I said, "Are you sure you're using a condom?" Oh, STI. And the third one is a colleague of mine. She came to my clinic saying, "You know that burning mouth thing you're talking about? I've got that. And the other thing you're talking about, the burning vagina, I've got that. And then I've got this obesity, she's got a waist circumference of 48 inches. And I've got diabetes. And I'm on antibiotics for my recurrent urinary tract infections. You don't expect me to have sex with him, do you?" It's like, we're good friends, but we're not a good husband and wife couple.
Wow, so many different stories of different thoughts. And what are I know people are wanting, we've painted the picture. Some of us have been through various different stages of this, and we've painted the picture. Now, what are some things that we can actually do about these things? Neelima, why don't you carry on with that one?
Well, each one of these cases presents a different conundrum. So like the first couple, it's about communication, it's about education, understanding that because you're going through menopause, because you had kids 20 years ago, your sexual self, your identity as a woman doesn't just get dissolved with your motherhood or just because your kids have left home. You need sex as much as your husband does. You need the intimacy, you need the stroking, you need the skin-to-skin contact, you need the orgasms, you need the vagina being exercised, you need the pelvic floor workouts. The second lady, the one who is, amazing in a wonderful relationship, she needs to understand how to protect her sexual self, how to use condoms correctly, how to, leverage her hormones, even though, they're going down, how to leverage it and still boost her libido, and not forget that, this relationship, like Ariel said, the communication is really important. Setting boundaries is important, not getting carried away, and understanding, owning your independence, owning your voice, owning your financial status. All of that is really important. You don't give it all up just because you're in a new relationship. And then the final lady is actually getting our health back on track, getting the foundations of health intact, because when your health is good, your vascular health is efficient, that's when your sexual health becomes better. And then the treatments that go into, like Dr. Jeda was talking about, vaginal estrogens or lubricants, using stuff to make sex more comfortable, less painful, using other strategies to build desire, and not getting hung up on, oh my God, I don't think of sex very much, so I don't want to be with him, kind of thing. So finding ways to reconnect and seeking intimacy for yourself. So these are different strategies that happen depending on how they present.
Fantastic. Ariel, do you have some thoughts on strategies of all the things that we've been talking about and some of the hardest things that women go through? What are some strategies for moving forward?
Are we speaking specifically about sex still? Or more?
Yes, yes, yes.
So if you've ever seen a romantic comedy, usually there's some kind of misunderstanding between the two protagonists, right? It's like in that romance, someone wishes that they could just say something, but they don't, and they do something awkward or dramatic instead. And then the other party feels like they're just misunderstood, and couldn't someone please just say something? And we're watching this movie like, well, just spit it out already, just have the conversation. And yet in our lives, we overthink everything, or we assume that someone else, because our partner's known us for so long, or we've been in the relationship for so long, that they should just figure it out, or they could Google it, right? And instead, we just need to say the words of, this is how I'm feeling, or this is what's happening in my body. And often we don't say those things because there's a good amount of insecurity or low self-esteem, or we fear how it's going to be received. And so really the first step is to spend time getting clear on our feelings about this change in our body. How do we feel about having a lower sex drive or a different desire or fatigue, and it affecting us? Maybe by journaling, maybe by talking out loud to a friend who can witness us going for a walk and sorting out our thoughts. And then when we are really clear on how we feel, what we think, and what we need or want, then being able to just express it to the people who are important to us and allowing them to just hear us. Maybe letting them know, I don't expect you to have an answer. I don't need you to fix anything, especially if you're with a male partner. They want to fix it. They can't fix it. So instead, just be like, this is where I am. And now how do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? And just starting the conversation somewhere, because then you can work together to find a solution. And if you're single moving through this, then you can work with yourself to find those solutions, which is so important.
Absolutely. Whether you're in partnership or single, there are solutions for all of us. Jeda, do you have any thoughts to add to this? Strategies on dealing with how sex is for us at these ages?
So in terms of, Ariel talked a lot about communication, and I think that that's really important and key in any relationship. One of the things that I often suggest to my patients when they're not feeling particularly inclined necessarily to have sex with their partner, sometimes it's about, something new in their lives, and they meet someone new, like Nalima was saying, and they get pretty excited. And I usually tell people to find a new activity to do together that requires communication, even if it's like a new sport or something they can learn together or something they both enjoy doing together, that is other than watching TV or, playing Scrabble's great, but it's mostly quiet. So, doing something together that actually requires some communication and camaraderie and not necessarily too much competition.
Right.
And then that can help sometimes rekindle communication and togetherness and just almost getting to know each other again, almost dating again in a way.
That's awesome. I'm seeing some really great stuff in the chats. Pickleball, hip action, take some dancing lessons, go do some different things. I love some of these comments in, and she's planning a 5-Saturday event in April for hip dancing. I'm so in. We live near each other, so I think I can do that. And what are some tips to deal with the actual practical things? We've talked about sex, and really it's about intimacy and communication. What about some practical things for managing the hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, vaginal dryness, painful sex, brain fog, weight gain? I know that's a lot, so there might be different strategies, but let's comment on some of those. Nilima, why don't you start us off?
So the way I work with my clients is I use something called a menopause rating scale, and that categorizes their symptoms into physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, and genital symptoms. And that gives me a good idea of whether they need just vaginal estrogen, pelvic floor exercises, and guidance on how to have better sex, less painful sex, or it is the rest of the body symptoms like the hot flushes, like the body ache, the joint pains, the palpitations, the mood swings, which are insomnia, depression, and anxiety, which are then affecting the sex life and the relationship. So when it comes to physical and psychological symptoms, particularly hot flushes, when you look at the guidance from the International Menopause Society, hot flushes, severe hot flushes, we know are also associated with higher cardiovascular risk. So severe hot flushes do come under the category where menopause hormone therapy is, women are eligible to request menopause hormone therapy. None of the other symptoms are not primary indications for hormone therapies. They're better off being managed with lifestyle changes, with improving nutrition, breathing, movement, getting sleep on track, lowering stress levels, boosting oxytocin levels. The simple strategies for hot flushes is wearing layered clothing, light clothing, having a facial mist, maybe something containing rose oils, having a hand fan. I used to carry a little fan in my bag a lot, carry a little bottle of water all the time. So you need to sip because your mouth goes dry very typically. Making sure that when you sleep at night, sometimes you've got to negotiate with your partner. You might need to sleep separately for if your hot flushes are really bad and you get them under control or for some time. Sometimes they're agreeable, sometimes not so much. You might want the air conditioning on full blast, and your partner might not. You might want the fan full blast, they might not. So it can lead to arguments. It's important to have the conversation, be open about it. And then wear layered clothing that you can take off. And particularly for a lot of women who have genital symptoms, I say, take off your underwear at night. Sleep without panties. Leave it open to the air.
Right, thank you. Jetta, any comments on tips for any of these issues?
Wow, Nilima really covered a lot of the a couple of specifics. Coming from a Chinese medicine point of view, I use Chinese herbs, and I always recommend eliminating things that are dehydrating, like alcohol, coffee, sugar, certain types of teas, caffeine in general. So just specifically helping the body nourish itself by eating really nourishing foods and avoiding the ones that are actually stealing. We call it stealing our yang. Essentially what it means is like stealing our life force or taking hydration out of our body as well. Our body needs a lot more of that. I think of, again, back to the adrenals needing support. I think of the endocrine system and helping to support the endocrine system through things that cause the least amount of stress on the body. And that's, again, physiological stress, emotional stress, and nutritional stress. I also think about hydration in a way that it helps your body to methylate or process the hormones that need to actually be detoxed from the body. Mm-hmm. So when we're doing things that are really well nourishing to our body, and even movement and letting your and functional sweating versus like spontaneous sweating.
Excellent.
Helping detox.
Totally. I love that. Well, if you have some water, let's all take a sip together, because that's really important.
And
Go
then
ahead.
and one other thing about hydration in Chinese medicine, if we're drinking cold fluids, it's not going to absorb as well. So it's like pouring ice water on a plant that's all dried up and then it just flows right off. That's kind of how we think of it. So,
oh, what a great metaphor. And before we go to Ariel, and I would love to hear some nutrition stuff from you on this, let's everybody take a stretch. Stretch your arms out, do what feels good in your body. Maybe stretch, get some energy going in your chair if you're standing. Oh, excellent. I know I feel better when I take intentional time to do that. So Ariel, how do we manage some of these symptoms through nutrition? What are your recommendations?
Okay, I love this because it takes this big topic and a lot of things that feel out of our control, and it brings it down to ground level where each of us can really take action in our everyday lives to help our bodies feel better. So we've heard a lot about the different organs and systems of the body that need extra support at this time. So we can talk specifically about the glandular system, the ovaries, the adrenals we talked about, but the thyroid as well plays a big part here. And then, of course, we also want to think about the liver, because the liver plays a big role in regulating our hormones and filtering what it wants to keep and what it wants to let go of. And then our cardiovascular system, we want to keep in really good health, as we talked about, to ensure that everything is working well. And of course, none of that would be possible without a really healthy digestive system. So I like to start with my clients working on their digestive system to make sure that everything is functioning as best as possible, so that when they eat all of those nourishing foods, they're actually being absorbed. So the first thing we can look at is simply, like, before we even get into the food, slow down when you're eating your meals. Chew your food really well. It seems so simple, but don't invest in all of these expensive supplements and foods if you're not going to take the time to break them down properly. So if you're chewing your food really well, you're making sure that you're not, driving and then eating something at the same time or scrolling through social media. It's so key and so simple. And then the next thing is, how is your gut health? So how many of you are experiencing bloating right now? How many of you are experiencing some excess or uncomfortable gas, right? Is that a part of your daily life? And if so, then we want to think about, well, how can I better keep my gut in balance? And then we want to look at some foods that are prebiotic and probiotic. So instead of going right to probiotic pills, something that's so simple is, if you're having fermented vegetables. My favorite is sauerkraut up here in Nova Scotia. They make a really good one. It's so simple. It's cabbage and salt. Maybe you prefer kimchi, but 2 tablespoons of that with a couple of your meals a day is going to work wonders for your whole system. Okay, so really focusing on your gut microbiome. Then a couple other things, because this could be a whole thing of its own, so I'll keep it short. But when we talk about hydration, it's not just water, it's the minerals that are in the water. So if you're drinking reverse osmosis water or water that's been filtered, or if it's really poor quality or it has a lot of contaminants, invest in a better water filter and potentially look at putting mineral drops, humic acid, fulvic acid into your water, because that is actually going to do so much to fight fatigue, to fight brain fog, to wake you up, to improve your cardiovascular function. Or you could use sugar-free electrolytes if you're really dragging through the day. That will give you a huge boost. A couple other things that I'll mention very quickly are, number one, cruciferous vegetables. Okay, these are magical for this time of life, particularly broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, all of that family, because they help support the liver function, which will then help with hormone detoxification and balancing. So incorporate those on a regular basis. Healthy fats are really good for improving our hormone production, because hormones are actually made of fat primarily. So we want to look at olive oil, flaxseed oil, avocado oil, soaked nuts and seeds. Those are all really important right now. Avocados, so juicy and nourishing. And protein is also really, really important right now, because amino acids, what protein is made of, is the building blocks of our muscles, of our hormones. And so making sure that we're getting a good amount of protein, and if you can tolerate it, organ meats are really nourishing right now, because they have not only the protein, but a lot of the vitamins and the minerals that we are looking for. So those are just a few little hot tips, but it's definitely a big conversation. So feel free to ask me if you want more specific information.
Yes, and Ariel has many programs about that, and so definitely connect with her on her offerings for sure. Let's dive into hormone replacement therapy, or bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I know that's something everybody turns to. What are those two things, and should women be doing that and exploring it more? Neelima, why don't you comment on that first, please?
There's different types. So bioidentical hormone therapy was touted because they take a reading of what your hormones are like, and then they manufacture some tablets that are in proportion to what you need, and they're supposed to be hormones that your body naturally produces. The other types of hormone therapy, menopause hormone therapy, is also called another type called body identical. So that's also hormone therapy that comes in pills, patches, creams, or gels, which is designed again from hormones that are similar to the human body. They're also made in a lab. So both of these are actually made in a lab. And then the third type is something like Premarin, which is made from horses or urine. It's extract of animal hormones. And all of these are used across the world for women who need hormone support. We have guidelines now on who's eligible and who isn't. And particularly, I want to draw the attention, and there's a big drive to everybody, going for natural remedies, and everybody should have natural remedies and herbal remedies, and you shouldn't be taking any kind of synthetic hormones. The truth is, both bioidentical hormone therapy and body identical hormone therapy, nobody's getting these hormones from human beings. They're all being made in a lab. They're just being changed according to the profile you submit. And the truth is, your hormone profile is never going to be the same. It changes from hour to hour as you're going through menopause. Morning and evening, your hormones are going to be different. They're going to be different days of the week, depending on your activity levels, your hydration levels, how well you've slept the night before, whether you're on kind of medication, if you've got thyroid hormone issues. Your hormones are changing all the time. It's impossible to find a tablet that is going to mimic every single hormone in your body. So we shouldn't be under the myth that just because we're buying something that's advertised as being this identical or that identical, is that we're getting an elevated form of it. No. The way you're prescribed hormone therapy is based on your symptoms, and with a detailed discussion with you about the risks and the benefits of hormone therapy. And then as long as you're aware of what they are, an informed decision has got to be made. And there is no hormone therapy on the planet that actually can cure stuff if your lifestyle stuff is not in order. So if you're not sleeping properly, you eat dinner really late, you're carb-laden food, you have a lot of processed food, you don't exercise, and you're sedentary, it doesn't matter what hormone therapy anybody gives you, your symptoms are not going to improve that much.
Thank you. That's really hard-hitting information there. Thank you. Jetta, do you have anything to add from the traditional Chinese medicine perspective about hormone replacement therapy?
I like the point about anything you're taking isn't necessarily going to be a magic cure unless your body can process it and you're looking after other parts of your body. We think about just even our own hormone pathways and how we utilize and use our own hormones that are coming from our own body, and how we detox from those, and how we absorb our foods and our minerals to be able to process what is in our body, let alone putting something foreign in our body and expecting it to be able to be absorbed and converted and used at a cellular level. So I like that. One of the things you mentioned was being hormone prescriptions being based on a consultation of how your symptoms are. And I find that there are a lot of doctors out there that are prescribing hormones just based on some kind of protocol that really doesn't have anything to do with what is happening with the woman. It's like, this is how much you should take this and come back in 6 months. And then there's no follow-up. And I think that women should be seeing someone who actually has training in this area.
And how do you find somebody with training in that area?
I find in my city, mostly it's naturopaths. There are some functional medicine allopathic physicians that have training and have been practicing it for a long time. Usually if your doctor pulls out a chart, looks up your weight, and then looks at what your weight and age, and then we know they probably don't have training.
Got it. I see Ariel has a comment here too as soon as you're finished.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Ariel, go for it.
I won't comment specifically other than that due to a medical condition I was dealing with, Sheehan syndrome, I have had my fair share of experience with conventional hormone replacement therapy and bioidentical hormone therapy. What I will say is bioidentical tends to come with less of those side effects and experience more of the benefits. However, it's still quite scary to think about the long-term repercussions of these medications. So the number one thing I would say is to be your own ally and advocate. Often we think, oh, well, this is out of my realm of understanding. I'm going to leave it to the experts. And yes, absolutely. As the doctors were saying, you want to make sure that you're seeing someone who's so well educated and understanding of these things. But you can also keep track of your own symptoms as you're using these medications. So I really recommend keeping a journal and tracking your symptoms and being clear. This is what I would like to get rid of. This is my wish list. This is how I would like to feel. And then on a daily basis, weekly basis, check in with yourself and see, are my symptoms going down? Am I feeling better? Is my energy getting better? Am I feeling juicier? Because there are risks associated and you want to be clear, is this benefiting me in the way that I want? And so is it really worth it? And if your doctor's like, well, I don't know, and you go and to them and you're like, well, I don't know, then no one knows what's happening. So that's the one piece of advice. Know your own body first and best.
Right. And if your doctor is saying something to you like, well, I don't know, then find a second opinion.
Yeah.
And maybe consult with a naturopath or a registered holistic nutritionist or a gynecologist like Neelima and a traditional Chinese medicine or some other approach that draws you to them and try some things, because you don't have to be just stuck with what one doctor prescribes to you. Go ahead, Neelima.
If you're struggling to find a specialist, menopause specialist, sometimes there is a menopause society in different countries. For example, the American Menopause Society, the International Menopause Society, we have the Indian Menopause Society, the British Menopause Society. They will often maintain a directory. So you can actually look up the presence of a menopause expert in your area from that directory. But I do agree that sometimes you have to consult more than a few to find somebody who will actually listen to you and understand what you're saying and accept that, you know, it's a joint discussion. It's not about one person just dishing out something for the other person.
Fantastic. Jetta.
You're going to work on things from different perspectives too. And when you do find someone you really trust and that has knowledge and you feel like you have a good rapport with them, ask them what other practitioners they work with. Because you're going to want someone to help you with your nutrition and your HRT and potentially looking at it from other perspectives like Chinese medicine. And so build a team for yourself.
I love that. Build a team. We're coming to close to the end of our time together. Man, it goes by so quickly. Some healthy habits that you want to leave people with. I know we've referred to some, but if you could summarize it in your own words, what are some key healthy habits? Jetta, you were just talking. Why don't you start?
Just talking. Activities. I think movement is so important. we start to get a little creaky, we start to get some aches and pains, we stop moving, stop using it, and that is the opposite of what we should be doing. We might need to alter our movement or alter what we're doing or work with someone who can help with that too, but not doing anything is going to make everything worse. And of course, the diet, and one of the things we kind of talked about when we were meeting, the four of us earlier, was self-esteem and how that can affect how we look after ourselves moving forward. And I think I can't stress enough how important it is to find people who are like-minded, also want to be on a health journey. Doesn't even have to be people your own age, doesn't even have to be females, but you're looking for people to surround yourself with that are interested in their health and looking after themselves and interested in doing having some of the same goals. And that can be your partner too.
Yes.
And learning new things can be really empowering for your mind, your body. So building your self-esteem and building your sense of self in those kinds of ways.
Fantastic. Thank you. Neelima, and then Ariel, you can bring us home on this one.
Some important habits that I've learned to do myself is, like Dr. Jera said, movement, making sure you get to sleep on time, hydrate yourself, don't compromise on nutrition. I think when you're younger, you can get away with a lot of mistakes in your eating habits, and you can slip more often. But as you get older, those slips need to happen less and less often. So building a really strong habit of observing yourself. Meditation and journaling and self-reflection, really important. And building time into your day to get oxytocin boosts. That is something that will help manage a lot of the psychological symptoms around menopause. And having good sex.
Having good sex. Okay, awesome. Ariel, take us home on this one, please. What strategies do you incorporate? I know you'll incorporate all the ones that have been said. What can you add to this?
I would add to nourishing yourself, moving your body, making sure that you have other activities that are strengthening your sense of self-worth, self-confidence. All of those things are so important. The last thing that I would add is really lean into this transition in your life and be proud of it. I remember being introduced to these three phases as like the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And so we think of the crone as being like this old lady, and she's cranky and she's mean. But let's think of it as like this really fabulous, wise sage who's seen so much and done so much and just has worlds of experience that they can share, and really own that at that period of your life. And I've heard so many women and so many clients who complain, well, I'm not seen and I'm not heard and nobody cares. Well, are you asking to be seen? And are you stepping up and using your voice? And are you really making sure that this change can happen? So be that change for yourself and for others. If you feel like you are forgotten or you're not important or your needs aren't being met, ask for what you need. Be brave. Think of this as the encouragement that you need, the little gentle nudge to really be brave and step up and ask for what you need and put yourself first for once. That would be an amazing habit to adopt. That's what I'll say. Put yourself first.
I love it. Put yourself first. And we're going to have an extra 30 minutes of question and answer with you amazing women here. But before we end this session, I know we're at our 60-minute mark. I have an offer for you, and I'm just going to share my screen. And bear with me one moment here. Here we go. And one of the things that we talk about is that we've talked about a few times this time is sleep. And it's such a big deal right now. We've decided to make our next Mind Myself Health discussion about sleep. And so here we go. Reclaiming your energy, the power of sleep, stress management, and stamina building. That's the title of it. And we have 3 amazing practitioners who are coming. But if we don't have proper sleep, it's the foundation for our healthy and productive life. We've talked about it today as well. But I think we need to dive a little bit deeper into this, because sleep deprivation, here's a quote for you, is a thief that robs you of your vitality and energy, and it can leave you feel drained and unable to function at your best. We want to function at our best. So our 3 panelists are an osteopathic practitioner who is a kinesiologist and works with elite athletes. We have an energy practitioner who does Reiki, among other energy healing modalities, and a behavior psychologist. So it's going to be at the same time 6 weeks from now. And you can, of course, view it free on YouTube, like those of you who are on YouTube right now doing that, or you can participate and become a Mind Myself Insider and experience it live in Zoom for the full 90 minutes and have an opportunity to ask fabulous practitioners your questions, all for $15. If we were going to charge for this, it would probably be at least $50, but it's $15. But wait, there's more. First bonus, for people who sign up today, you get entered into a draw for 5 spots for a 15-minute discovery call with Doc Jetta. The value of that is $65, and it's free today. And there's more. Bonus number 2, same thing for Dr. Nilima. 5 spots for discovery consults. And I don't know about you, but I know 15 minutes would be incredibly valuable with both of these women. $65 today, it's for free. Third bonus, Ariel's 5 tips that really work on how to avoid menopause belly. And we've covered some of them today, but she's put together in 2 pages, 2 sheets. And if you really applied them, that would change your life immensely. And all today for only $15 US. So we encourage you to sign up. I know Wendy has put the link in the chat, both on Zoom and in the YouTube live experience. So ways to stay engaged with us. We would love to stay connected with you. Come to our next event. We always want to offer a free version. And if you want to be a Mind Myself Insider, again, it's only $15. We invite you to come to the Mind Myself website. There is so much information there to get you started, finding out about different modalities that you can use. And of course, we have our Mind Myself community. We would love to see you there. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to our audience who is on YouTube live streaming.